Starting any type of project is a roller coaster, is a challenge to your ability to adapt. There was a time in which we got a lot of momentum and support. We were able to raise a lot of money from amazing investors, and we took advantage of that to really expand and grow our capabilities. Now, more recently, that has changed, right? What some people call greenwashing, right? Companies are not talking too much about their environmental actions because they fear criticism, right? So for us, it's been a time to adapt, a time to, attempt to become more efficient and more focused, right? There was a time in which we were flaring, exploring a lot of different directions of how we could help, unlock this market. And now it's a time in which we're focusing and trying to understand what is it that we can be the best in the world at. But we're going to try to do a lot more with less and go through, a winter time, because there's always a springtime in the other side.
You're listening to A Climate Change. This is Matt Mattern, your host. I've got a great guest on the program today, Diego Saez Gil, who is founder of Pachama, which uses AI and satellite data to restore the forest and help fight climate change. Diego was former CEO of Blue Smart, and he was named on the Forbes 30 Under 30 list back in 2016. So now he's probably due for a 40 under 40 list pretty soon. He still looks so young. You look so young, maybe you've got a few more years for that. But anyway, it's great to have you on the program.
Thank you so much, Matt. Yeah, that was a long time ago.
But just maybe you can give us a little bit of your background and, where your interest in the environment started and how it led you to where you're at right now.
Yes, for sure. So I am originally from Argentina. I grew up in the north of Argentina in a place called Tucumán, where we have the beautiful Yunga forest. It's a tropical cloud forest that connects all the way to the Amazon rainforest. And as a kid, I would go out a lot to nature. My grandparents had houses in the forest, and my two grandmothers were very connected to nature, to trees. So they fostered in me and my brothers and cousins a deep love for nature. And then life took me around the world. I was lucky to get a scholarship to do a master's in Europe, in Barcelona. So I moved from Argentina to Barcelona. And then after working in consulting a little bit in Spain, I moved to the US, initially to do an internship. And eventually I decided to start a company here in the US and become an entrepreneur. My passion was entrepreneurship, technology, travel. And so I focused on those areas for a couple of years. And I helped build 2 tech startups that raised funding, that launched new products, and that eventually got acquired. But after going through that journey of entrepreneurship, I ended up in a moment in which almost a purpose crisis, right? Like, why I'm working so hard while the world is, heading into a very dangerous trajectory, right? With climate change, with the decimation of nature, and with the way that society really is building, these economic and systems that are not aligned with nature. So decided that I could contribute from the skills that I had developed, which were entrepreneurship, building new technologies, new products, and I thought that those skills could be useful. So it was actually after going on a trip to the Amazon rainforest. I took a mini sabbatical, after my last company got acquired. And in that time, I went back to South America and with my brothers decided to go to the Amazon. It was the first time that I got deep into the Amazon rainforest. And it's a very powerful experience to be in the middle of that giant jungle with these ancient trees. We were fortunate to stay with an indigenous community and got to learn from them the connection with nature they have. But also in the trip, I got to see deforestation on the way to the heart of the Amazon. And it's really heartbreaking to see a clear cut of what used to be recently a super dense forest with millions of species now turn into a bare land with some cows roaming around. So I came back from the trip, decided to do something about it, and being a technologist now, I was aware of how satellites were advancing rapidly. How today we have hundreds of new satellites in orbit with cameras on it that allow us to see the Earth with a level of definition and frequency that was unthinkable before. Also, I was paying attention to AI and how with these new deep learning models and new computing capabilities, now we could process giant amounts of data, and with that make predictions, create models that allow us to do predictions. Today we're all familiar with large language models, right, like ChatGPT style AI, but back then I could also see how that was going to apply to imagery and to satellite imagery in particular. So with that is that we decided to start Pachama as a technology startup with a mission of helping protect and restore nature and address climate change, and the specific focus on developing these technologies, AI applied to satellite data, to help measure, understand, report on what's going on forests worldwide, and in doing so, help drive funding and action to its protection and restoration. Because we believe, and now 6 years into building a company, and I can tell you more about the journey, but we believe that this can be reversed. We're seeing it already. Areas where forests are being restored, where deforestation is being stopped, and nature comes back. The resiliency of nature is amazing. So we're just there to help a little bit by observing, informing, and then driving funding and reporting on the impact of the actions.
It's tremendous work, and I understand that you've kind of partnered with a number of big tech companies like Spotify, Google, Meta, Microsoft, and tell us how you partnered with them and how that's working out, and kind of what are some of the wins that you've been seeing by doing your work.
Yeah, so we have the insight that today, like it or not, corporations have so much power and influence. In fact, the top tech companies in Silicon Valley have more economic power than all the governments of Latin America, right? So that is a force that can be channeled to for good, can be channeled to help protect and restore nature. And as it happens, many corporations are in fact committing to reducing and compensating the impact of their activities. And they have teams that are very dedicated to measuring the impact, measuring their CO2 emissions, but not just carbon, also their water impacts, their land impacts, and then investing in projects that can heal and compensate for that impact as they transform their operations to avoid that impact in the first place. So with that in mind, we partner with many corporations that today are investing in reforestation and regeneration projects around the world, or in conservation projects around the world. And of course, for these corporations, they want to make sure that they are investing in the right thing, that they can confidently, communicate what they're doing. So there is where our data, our insights, allows them to, well, first source projects that are doing things in the right way. Second, diligence those projects deeply. And thirdly, track those projects and be able to help them over time as they advance. So yeah, I mean, as a result of those partnerships, we have helped drive tens of millions of dollars to projects in 15 different countries that are already having amazing results on the land. And of course, this is not just about nature. These projects are empowering local communities with jobs that are related to this bioeconomy of regeneration for the regions.
It's kind of mind-blowing when you think of it that the Mag 7 stocks have more economic clout than an entire continent, and I was just recently in South America, and it is, both an amazing place, but a ginormous continent. I mean, it's just huge. You look at Brazil, and I think, "Oh, it's only about an inch, this little piece of the map, and, oh, it shouldn't be too far away," and it's like 1,500 miles. It's like, you know, it's huge.
I mean, if you put Argentina over Europe, you touch Morocco and Russia.
Yeah, this is big countries. So yeah, and to think that we have companies that have the economic power of hundreds of millions of people, and these, they're not like these are major cities. I mean, Buenos Aires, 18 million people, skyscrapers all over the place. It's not like it's a backward place. It's just mind blowing the amount of wealth that is locked up in these companies that so they're almost like state actors. So where do you see this going to next, and how can you kind of level this thing up, because the rate of climate change is kind of ratcheting up. We're not really knocking the emissions down sufficiently to kind of ward this off. We got to do a lot more than whatever we're doing. Great work thus far. No, no, not throwing any shade on you from your tree project, but
Yeah, no, and of course we also absolutely need state actors to engage. And it's a little bit baffling what we're seeing right now, right? With some countries, the U.S. exiting the Paris Agreement, right, and other countries really lagging behind on their commitments. But I believe that in the long term, the direction is clear towards the absolute necessity to act on climate change. And along the way, we are going to see pendulums, right, and waves where sometimes the old thinking wants to, grab hold to what they have, but inevitably, and especially new generations coming into influence and power, uh, new generations will have a bigger stake on the future, because we are going to get to live on that future, right, in the 30s and 40s and 50s, where the worst of climate change is going to be seen. Um, but look, I think that there are reasons to be pessimistic for sure. When you see the continuation of the burning of fossil fuel, when you see the continuation of deforestation in so many parts of the world, and when you see again governments saying drill baby drill. In the other hand, the reason for optimism is the advancements in technology. I am a believer that technology, not always, but technology mindfully managed can actually be a great force for good and a great force for advancing, good causes such as solving climate change. And we are seeing how solar today is actually cheaper than any other source of electricity, right? Batteries are becoming, also more affordable and more resilient, more recyclable, more, powerful. Geothermal, wind, and like renewable energies, clean energy in general, is becoming actually a lot more feasible than before. Nuclear, I think we're going to see, both fusion and fission becoming safer and more available. And EVs, China and of course the US and Europe, are making great progress on electric vehicles. Latin America is lagging behind on electric vehicles. I would love to see a lot more EVs in Latin America. But so I think that technology is advancing. Now AI can actually help us make scientific breakthroughs and technological breakthroughs, engineering breakthroughs that allow us to accelerate the technologies needed to arrive to not a net zero economy, a zero carbon economy that is feasible within the next 2 decades. And in the meantime, I personally care a lot about nature, because nature is not just CO2. Nature is life. Nature is the millions of species that have been inhabiting on this planet for this period of time that we need to protect. And we have to make sure that in these 2 to 3 decades of a transition, that we can, save all the nature we can, and we can, give back ecosystems to the species that are endangered today, because everything is connected, right? Nature is, we are part of nature. and if we destroy the substrate that we are part of, we're not going to be able to build a sustainable civilization.
Well, where do you see this going as far as the satellite portion of what you do? And I know there's a lot of other companies that are, or a lot of companies other than Elon Musk's Starlink that are coming out there. Are you using Starlink now, or are you using other services?
No, Starlink today is focused on internet, not on Earth observation. I don't know if in the future they might, but today, companies focused on Earth observation are the likes of Planet, Maxar, and then of course NASA, the European Space Agency, the Japan Space Agency. They have been putting Earth observation satellites in orbit since the 70s, and a lot of the data is publicly available. That's something that is amazing, not to be taken for granted. Sometimes it's not easy to access, but is accessible by the public. And we've been using all those open source, imagery and combining it with private data. Uh, for example, the International Space Station has a LiDAR device on it, a program called JEDI. And for the last 4 years, it's been collecting basically a data set that reflects the height of the land, right? The height of the trees, the height of the mountains, right? Because it literally is shooting a laser from the International Space Station and then back, getting the distance, right? So with that data set, we combine it with satellite data, we combine it with airborne LiDAR, and we combine it with ground truth data. And with that, we are able to produce a machine learning model that predicts the carbon stock on the forest. And it's actually really good at it. And we've been measuring the uncertainty, the error of the prediction, because like every prediction, it has an error. But over a large landscape, the accuracy is actually pretty good. And that allows us to then automate the measurement of carbon for projects, the selection of land for projects. And this is something that works for projects that are, protecting nature for carbon credits, but it also works for governments that want to implement a large conservation at the jurisdictional level. And it works for agriculture if you want to transition to more regenerative agriculture. So we're very excited about these models. And to your initial question, there are more satellites and better sensors that are being launched by both private and public institutions that will allow us to continue understanding Earth in an incredible way.
Well, there's a lot of questions that could come out of that. I would say one of them is, have you been able to, measure what the rate of deforestation or reforestation effectively, like globally? Are we there yet, or are you really looking at a project by project basis, and then from there, can you determine like which projects are actually, when you're doing carbon credits, which ones actually deserve carbon credits and which ones are not actually performing?
Yeah, so historically we focus a lot more on projects and regions. Gradually we've been expanding to have a global coverage. And for example, our canopy height map or carbon stock map has global coverage and allows us to measure carbon anywhere in the world. But for deforestation, there is an amazing project called the Global Forest Watch. That's a project that is managed by WRI, the World Resources Institute, and they've been monitoring and reporting on deforestation worldwide. It's publicly accessible, and it's a really great source of understanding of deforestation. Now, we too are measuring historical deforestation. We use that historical deforestation of a region to establish a baseline of business as usual, of what is expected on a certain area. And with that, be able to predict into the future what might happen, and then allow to understand what is the additional carbon sequestration, the additional nature impact of an intervention today, right? What happens if you really, protect a belt of forest? What happens if you start the reforestation here? How that changes the trend of what was happening historically. And all that is done with AI, meaning that there isn't a subjective bias. and that allows us to rapidly determine the additionality and the merit of these projects that we help.
So, in terms of the carbon credit market, there's been a lot of kind of criticism of the carbon credit market, and projects that aren't really that viable or that effective. What are your thoughts on, has that improved because of the work that you're doing, and how so?
There's definitely been lots of criticisms. And I would say that some criticisms are philosophical, and I understand where they come from, and there are some people who are never going to be convinced that this is a valid mechanism, and that's fine. I'm okay with not everybody, fully supporting this idea. I happen to believe that it's a valid mechanism today to drive funding in this emergency where we are losing millions of hectares of forest every day, and where we are losing the opportunity of restore forest if we don't drive funding today. So I think from a philosophical perspective, I think it's a pragmatic way to drive funding from the economy to the ecology, and to do it in a way that causes an impact today. Now, some people, the philosophical criticism is, well, you are giving a permit to pollute to the others, right? Well, it happens actually when you look at the numbers, that the companies that are the most investing in carbon credits to compensate the footprint are the ones that are investing the most on clean energy and EVs, and transforming their operations to reduce their carbon emissions. And then you have companies that just don't care and don't do anything, right? So it's not that the ones that buy carbon credits then keep polluting or increase the pollution. That's not the case, right? Now, the other criticisms were more tactical and more implementation focused, and those we agree, and we've been working very hard to address those issues. And those the criticism there were things such as, well, people are taking these very arbitrary baselines. Someone is saying like, well, this forest was going to be completely gone. We're saving it, and we're getting all this money, and the forest maybe wasn't really in danger. Maybe the people who own that forest wasn't going to cut it down anyways, right? That has happened, unfortunately. And here is where having this satellite-based approach, looking at an entire region, what is the practice of the region? Is this an area where there is a lot of illegal deforestation, or where there is a lot of aggressive harvesting, either legal or illegal? And is the practice that is proposed really going to change the trajectory of the landscape? Now we can have these more objective answers to those questions, and make sure that only the projects who deserve, because they're effectively increasing carbon sequestration, get carbon credits. Other issues, were things such as, planting the wrong trees in the wrong place, right? Or people just, planting a monoculture of eucalyptus in a semi-deserted area, trees that they were going to cut down for timber in the future, and getting carbon credits for that, right? These things shouldn't happen, right? So, and I think that the fundamental problem was that 10, 15 years ago, when this early market emerged, we just didn't have the technologies to ensure good scrutiny, right? So people were designing the projects, there were methodologies, but they were designing the projects taking a lot of, flexibility on their approaches. And then you send an auditor to the field to check a portion of the project, and that was good enough, right? Well, today you cannot get away so easily. There are satellites that allows us to look at the history of a region, that allows us to look at the accounting of a project in detail, and that allows us to track the projects over time, and in doing so, really increase the quality, the transparency, and the accountability of these projects. And that's a process that's been happening for the last 5 years, I would say. It's not just Pachama, it's many companies and NGOs and alliances of organizations that have been working really hard to raise the standard, to make sure that the mistakes or the problems of the past don't happen again, and that we can establish infrastructure for a market that can actually drive big volumes of money to projects that deserve it, and that cause a real impact both on carbon, on biodiversity and on the ecological and social impacts that we need to see on the ground.
Well, as with any market in its infancy, there are going to be problems, and it's being refined, and great work to you to bring some degree of accountability to this, so there is a sense of, hey, if I'm contributing to this project, it's actually going to do something positive. So kudos to you and others like you who are doing this work, because it is so important to have a functioning market, have trust in the process, so that I know, hey, if I said I was going to contribute X to, Diego's organization, it's actually producing a result. Um, so tell us a little bit about you said you're working with indigenous groups. How are you doing that, and how does that kind of fit into the puzzle of carbon credits or just restoring nature?
Yeah, I mean, indigenous communities, local communities in Latin America and around the world, they are welcoming any tool that can help them, protect their environments, protect the lands where they have lived for thousands of years, right? So there's many indigenous communities that are designing either carbon projects or other types of projects that can help them get the support, the funding, the attention to protect land. And we're actually seeing it with great success in places like Brazil, in places like Colombia, in places like Costa Rica, and so forth and so on. Now, I did want to mention that the tools and technologies that we build cannot help just through carbon credits projects. There are other initiatives that are being pushed forward. Like, for example, the European Union has a law to avoid deforestation on the products they buy. It's called the EU Deforestation Regulation. And that means that companies that source projects from forest countries will need to monitor the supply chain to make sure that they're not producing deforestation, right? So if you're buying coffee in Europe, you want to make sure that that coffee is not coming from the forest in the Amazon and planting coffee, right? It's coming from an area where there was already coffee, or where you were, mixing coffee production with agroforestry. Um, and so again, satellite data and AI can help there. Another approach is the idea of insetting. It's companies that produce agricultural products in their supply chain. They can enhance the ecosystems where their products come, right? And again, satellite data and AI can help on that. So I think at the end of the day, it's about using all these frameworks and coming up with even new frameworks that allows us to incentivize and keep accountable to those who are the drivers of deforestation and those who have the power to enhance ecosystems because they have an influence on them.
Is there some kind of label that we could look at as consumers and say, hey, this is reliable? I know I see on products, say, free trade or fair trade and stuff like this, and I'm like, okay, is this really reliable to show that this company is getting sustainably sourced products?
Yeah, the Rainforest Alliance is an NGO that has been working on that for a long time. I think that they still have a long way to go, and that hopefully more products work with them. But yeah, they are one organization that is focusing on making sure that products are not destroying the rainforest. For timber, for wood, there is a FSC certification. And again, those organizations can also benefit from these technologies. They must use them. And in fact, we are in conversations with both of them about how we can partner, because ultimately the only way to audit these is by observing from space in real time what's going on the land, right, on those supply chains.
So what excites you most about the role of technology and how it can play into our climate future?
Yeah, I mean, I think that AI, the most optimistic vision that I can come up with for AI is that AI becomes our partner on Earth guardianship, right? AI, the way to think about it is artificial intelligence is an extension of human intelligence, and human intelligence is an extension of nature intelligence, of Earth intelligence, right? And if that is the case, then artificial intelligence is nature intelligence, right? It's nature intelligence now living on a computer substrate, and therefore the purpose of artificial intelligence is to protect the planet in which it exists, and from which it comes from, right? So I imagine a future in which humans and AI work together to create a civilization that is aligned with nature, that allows us to have sustainability for real, for the long term, and where we can, then go on to explore the stars, right? But once we have actually built a sustainable, regenerative civilization here. Of course, that sounds, optimistic science fiction, but we have to have these visions of how, AI can be an ally, and can be a tool for regeneration. I think it is possible.
Well, I think it has to be built into the AI models that, hey, we want to have a sustainable future. Well, how do I get there? Because the only way we're going to get to the stars is if we create a world in which we are sustainable, because we're going to blow the place up and there's going to be no getting to the stars.
We don't have the rights yet. We don't have the right to explore the stars unless we have our home in order.
Right. Yeah. Somebody posited on the show the other day with that. Yeah, any civilization that would be capable of going and traveling to the stars has completely sustainable, no carbon footprint, because that you've got to work that out because, you know, and I think that that's got to be the model is like, hey, and the problem is it seems like some of the AI models are kind of agnostic to values or anything like that. How do you deal with that?
Look, everything is moving so fast on AI, and I think that every week you see new progress made both on the capabilities of these models, but also on the alignment of these models. And yeah, I mean, we are in this moment of extreme uncertainty, right? Of course, I painted an utopian scenario. There are dystopian scenarios, right, in which AI destroys civilization, right? And then there are intermediary bad scenarios where we go through a transition period where tens of billions of people loses their jobs, and where society is really crumbling until we figure out a new stable state. But I think at the same time, there has been cases in the past in which these deep transformations have worked out in a way that brought more prosperity and more progress for society. So we have to hope for the best. And again, this time, we have like these multiple crises happening at the same time, right? Planetary boundaries being crossed, uh, AI advancing at full speed, and now the geopolitical order being, dismantled, right? So these three things are gonna unfold during the next decade, and it's gonna be a period of high uncertainty. But at the same time, sometimes that's the compost for what's new, for a new level of values, and a new civilization that we know is needed.
Well, certainly at the end of the day, we all have to live together, and we either destroy the planet kind of together or we save it together. There's two options. It's kind of binary. It's not like China saves it and we destroy it. Like it's gone.
Now more than ever, we are one system, deeply interconnected, and as you said, there's no way around that a collective unfolding. And as I said, I think that from a spiritual perspective, sometimes I like to think in terms of cycles, right? Indigenous ancient wisdoms and Oriental ancient wisdoms always think in terms of cycles, right, rather than linear timelines. And we are in a turning of a cycle, right, both at a real level and at the spiritual level. And we have to hope that the new cycle that is being born happens smoothly, and in the right direction.
Well, tell us what are some of the most unexpected changes you faced in your work with Pachama?
I mean, definitely starting a venture, starting any type of project is a roller coaster, is a challenge to your ability to adapt, and in our case in particular, there was a time in which we got a lot of momentum and support. We were able to raise a lot of money from amazing investors, and we took advantage of that to really expand and grow our capabilities. And it was a time also in which there was a lot of momentum around, corporations acting on climate, right? Now, more recently, that has changed, right? And now, there is more economic uncertainty, and there is also an incentive for companies to actually stay quiet about what they're doing related to climate and sustainability, what some people call greenwashing, right? Companies are not talking too much about their environmental actions because they fear criticism, right, from either side of the political spectrum, crazy enough. And definitely also investments into environmental or climate tech companies has gone down in the last 2 years. So for us, it's been a time to adapt, a time to attempt to become more efficient and more focused, right? There was a time in which we were flaring, exploring a lot of different directions of how we could help, unlock this market. And now it's a time in which we're focusing and trying to understand what is it that we can be the best in the world at, and how can we double down on that, and then go and try to help as much as we can with that core competency. And that also might mean that the team is going to stay, as small as possible, right, for now. But we're going to try to do a lot more with less, and go through, a winter time, because there's always a springtime in the other side. And I think that startups are like that. You need to adapt. You need to be very attuned to your environment. You need to focus, and you need to have a North Star, right? That for us has been so valuable, to have a clear purpose, a clear mission, and clear values as well from day one, that allows us to, keep going in the face of any type of obstacles in the way.
You've talked about being in the era of missionaries, not tourists, and climate. What do you mean by that?
Like everything, sometimes things get into fashion. And there was a time in which climate tech became fashionable in Silicon Valley. And what that meant is that a lot of people who weren't truly committed to this came and either said, yeah, we're going to invest in climate tech startups, or we're going to start climate tech startups, or we're going to join climate tech startups, right? So investors or entrepreneurs or employees. And as the winds change in the last 2 years, we saw a lot of that people leaving, unfortunately. And that's fine, because at the end of the day, there is a core of missionaries, of people who truly have decided to dedicate their life to this mission. And we're here, and we're going to be here for the decades to come, working in different ways into unlocking this mission. But I think it's the nature of, the nature of humans. And it's going to happen in the future again. There's going to be another moment in which, climate tech becomes sexy in Silicon Valley again, and we're going to see tourists coming again and then going again. But that's good. We take them, by the way, when they come, investors and people who want to work on these companies, we will accept you always.
Yeah, it's always hard to know who's going to be the missionary or who's going to be the tourist. In
It happen in
my
every industry, in every sector.
Right, right. You have people come in on an interview and say, God, I believe in this all the way, and then they're gone in 6 months. So, like, you just kind of don't know how it's going to play out in real time.
I do hope that there is going to be a moment in which working with a purpose and it's basically a given, right? Where people don't want to work on anything that doesn't have a purpose. And I think you see it with young people, you see it with millennials and X generation. They don't want to work for companies that are damaging the planet. They don't want to work for companies that don't have a good purpose, right? So I think at some point that'll be it'll be great that becomes table stakes.
Right. And I think it requires kind of us creating opportunities for them because sometimes they go just they have to put food on the table, so they go with XYZ company. So, having more opportunities for them to be able to contribute their time and talents into something meaningful is super important. So what's your message to environmentalists who care deeply about climate but feel overwhelmed or powerless?
Yeah, I mean, I feel overwhelmed and powerless sometimes as well, right? So, I mean, that is part of being human and being in the arena of working, on this, super difficult missions. My message is take care of yourself, right? What I do sometimes is I would do a mini retreat for myself with the support of my wife. I would go and rent an Airbnb and do kind of like a meditation retreat by myself. Sometimes I would do a meditation retreat in some monastery or some meditation center, but sometimes it's just going and taking a weekend away from your phone, away from the news, and just to go deep inside yourself, meditate, be in nature, do whatever brings you back to your soul, brings you back to your place of inner peace. And then on a daily basis, to me is meditation. For other people might be yoga, might be running, might be something else, but taking care of your body, taking care of your mind, taking care of your soul, I think they're fundamental for those who are working on the world. And then finally, and this also from kind of like a spiritual perspective, not getting attached to the result of the work. Like the Bhagavad Gita says, right? You are entitled to your effort, and that's what it's about, to doing your duty, and that's enough, right? And then what happens will happen, and you cannot get too attached to the results and the outcomes.
Well, brilliant wisdom along with great science. Thank you so much for being on the program, Diego. I relate to a lot of what you said. I studied the Tao Te Ching a bit, and that's kind of a similar line from them is, hey, you just do the work and let go of the result.
Align with the Tao. Yeah.
So with that, we will break and do what we can, and that's I think the call to action, which you had said before, is like do something. That's the best way to kind of shift one's mood is to get into action too. To hey, take some even minor step, and then it'll lead to the next step. And I sometimes have to remind myself of that simple truth repeatedly.
And then another one is find community, right? Again, the Sangha, right? Find community of people who care, of people who you can talk about this with, of people who you can collaborate with. I think that it's important, and in general, in times of crisis, building communities of trust and love is super important. So don't isolate, and find your community.
Excellent advice. Well, thank you again for being on the show, founder of Pachama. Everybody check out Diego's website at Pachama and contribute to it, get involved, and let's keep moving forward. So have a great day, everybody.
Thank you, Matt, for your great podcast.
To learn more about our work at A Climate Change and how you can help us reach our goal of planting 30,000 trees in the Amazon this year, visit aclimatechange.com. Don't forget to subscribe to our podcast on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. If you like this episode, please share it with a friend. See you next time.